where we want to get to. You know, as I alluded to, you kind of want to be able to do this assignment on Excel, and we're going to show you how to do some of that stuff today. Some things are a little easier, some things are not easy. A lot of it's going to come down to how much sort of effort you put into this. So, like I said, what I would encourage you not to do is I would encourage you not to stress. Particularly, do not feel overwhelmed if you're having a hard time doing it right now. It's okay. I mean, that's part of what we want to do in here. Does that make any sense? So it's not like, you know, on one hand, it's funny your homework's worth 5 points, but on the other hand, you want to learn this stuff, right? You do. I mean, you might say I don't want to, but I want you to learn it, even if you don't want to. So I'm trying to pull this crap up, and there it is.
The homework is due Wednesday, right?
I think so, but if you need more time, that is completely fine by me. You don't have to turn it in tomorrow. If you want more time to do it, you can feel free to do it. Or Wednesday night. You can turn in Thursday if you want or whatever. I get my days confused. Sorry about that. Yeah, I think the actual due date is Wednesday at midnight, right? So, but you can, if you need more time, that's cool. I won't take any points off. I mean, now if you turn it in December, then maybe. You do it now, you're okay, at least for now. So one of the most common questions that I got was, how do you do like a histogram in Excel? Look, there's a couple things that might be worth doing. And again, I don't know how much time you have. I know you guys are busy, but you know, if you want to learn this, there's certain things that you just have to do on your own if you want to learn things. Now, a good piece of advice is, just for this assignment at least. No, I'm not saying, and you don't have to do it even for every problem, but so here's my advice. With things like histograms, frequency charts or whatever, distributions, etc. At least for this homework, do them by hand and then Excel. That would be my advice. Again, I don't care. You could do them all by hand if you want. You don't have to do them by Excel. You want to draw me a frequency distribution by hand, you want to draw me a histogram, I'm not going to be mad at you. My point I'm trying to make is, one day when you have a job, your boss ain't going to want it by hand. They're going to want a nice, pretty chart, right? They don't care about all the crap that you went through to get it. They just want solutions, right? They want answers. So, but that being said, usually the best way we learn is to do things by hand, touching and feeling, getting your hands dirty, so to speak. So what I would encourage that you do is, I would encourage you to try to do it by hand. It's actually not sort of that difficult to do so. So anyhow, I hope you'll do that. Does anybody have a question about that? And we're going to do an example now, if that's all right with you guys. Does anybody have a specific question? Does this make sense? I mean, it could be time consuming. I will say this, last semester I had a student, he handed this assignment and it was like this thick. It was insane. He did everything by hand and I was like, oh my God, you're crazy. And he's like, yeah, but I learned so much. And I said, all right. And I remember him saying, you know, you guys do those teacher evaluations. At the end, he actually wrote, thank you for making us do that. I learned more on that homework than I've done in most classes. So I said, good for you. So anyhow, that would be sort of the way I would tell you to think about it. Okay, so what we want to do then is we want to show you how to do it. So let's do an example, and we'll kind of show you how we might do this in Excel. But you're more than welcome to, you know, again, do it by hand if you want. I honestly don't care how you do it. So I'm going to generate some data, just like, you know, and then we're going to study it in Excel. So let's do that. So let's do I think we did something similar to this the other day. So let's do it again. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to generate. So the first thing I need to do is I need to go to Excel. Or not Excel, I need to go to go. So you guys might not be seeing this at home. Let me share it with you so you can see it. So again, you don't have to do this. I'm basically just, I'm doing this to generate some fake data that we can use. So you need not pay any mind to this. All right, so what I did is I just had the computer, generate me 25 numbers. Uh-oh, that's not good. Hold on a second. Okay, so I have 25 numbers here. So we're going to plug these creatures into Excel. So let's see if I can copy and paste. And I'm going to open Excel. And let's just see what happens. So one of the first challenges you might have is if you go for these problems and maybe you go search for the internet for salaries or freeze row percentage. I mean, how are you going to get your data into Excel? Are you going to type each one in manually, or can you copy and paste? You know, sometimes depending on what you have, it works. Other times it doesn't. So what just happened here when I copied and pasted is it didn't sort of translate the way we would hope, right? So I kind of don't want that. So what I'd like to do is I'm going to manually put it in over here. Does that make sense? So one of the first, now there's workarounds for this. The more practice you have, the better you get at this. But one of the quicker ways for an amateur to get numbers from like the internet or somewhere into Excel is to copy and paste and then redistribute. Does that, not redistribute, but rewrite it in. Does that make any sense? So let me just come over here and let's say I'm just going to put them down in order. So suppose I have 9. You guys probably aren't seeing Excel at home, huh? No. Ha. So anyhow, guys, what I was saying is I just copied them and threw them into Excel, but it didn't format them properly. Now, again, some of you might know how to do this more effectively than others, but you can, worst case scenario, you copy it in and replug them in. Does that make sense? So let's say I do 95 point, I'll round up to the nearest tenth, 95.6, and then 85.2, and then 70.3, and then 68.2, and then 76.9, and then 80.6. So again, this is tedious, and then it makes you right away want to find, okay, is there a better way I can do this? So, you know, obviously there is, but let's just say we're going to learn from experience the hard way. Now, of course, you might say, well, why don't you just copy each one and then move it down? Well, you could do that too. What I mean by that is, see, you can't really do it that way either. So you're kind of stuck. So there you go. Now you're starting to learn, like, what is one of these skills that maybe would be useful to have, and that is, how do you get data from one source to the next? I mean, this is tedious, isn't it not? But it's going to work for us. I didn't say that. 67, and then 77.9. Now, and the worst thing that could happen is I might have missed some of these guys. Did I miss any? We'll find out. And I'm going to clean this up in a second, but let's make sure that I have all 25 of them. So one way to sort of check that is I can highlight it and I can see, okay, how many do I have? Well, yeah, I don't know if you noticed it up here, but it told me I have 25. So I know I have 25. Let me show you that again. If you look in the left-hand corner up here where it tells you the cell number, right here I'm on H15, then I'm on H16. I mean, first thing, if you haven't used Excel before, you got to get good at understanding how the columns and rows are labeled. So watch what happens when I highlight this. You'll see that, right now I have the first 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and if I go all the way down, it'll say I'm from row 15 to 39. That's 25. So I don't think at least I didn't miss any of my data points, even though I might have typed one in incorrectly. Does that make sense? All right, so here's what we're going to do. Once I plug this in, I'm just going to go up here and I'm just going to delete this because it's ugly and it's annoying and it's in my way. And then I might even say, okay, well, I want to pull this up a little bit, so let me just highlight the first, say, few columns and let me delete them. So now my data's sort of, again, I didn't have to do that. I just wanted to do it. So let's call this, let's sort of, let's give this guy a name. So this is just our data. But suppose we want to, first thing we want to do is maybe we don't want to have it unorganized like this. Maybe what we'd like to do is list it in some sort of order, ascending to descending order. So what we could do is we can highlight it, and then you can right click. And there's lots of things you can do. So for example, you'll see format cells. Maybe you know what this means, maybe you don't know. And you're like, oh, okay, this doesn't really seem to be anything right now, so I ignore it. And by the way, what I'm going to tell you is learning by doing is the best way to learn. I know I keep saying that, but okay, so the next thing, there's this button here, quick analysis, but then I look at this filter, okay, sort. Okay, now this is cool. I can sort it from smallest to largest. And so when I do that, it automatically lists it from the smallest number to the largest. That's useful. So let's suppose I want to make a frequency distribution right away. I mean, of course, I know I showed you before we can compute the median and all that if we wanted. But let's suppose I want to make, well, let's just do that for fun. Can't hurt to do it again. So let's go over here. Let's do our mean. And what's our mean going to be? Our mean is, we'll hit this function, and then we know it's called average. And so we'll highlight the data, and then we'll hit OK. And we get our average is 79.182. So I want to make sure that I don't mess this up. I'm going to highlight and color this in so I know that that is the mean. Does that make sense? So I know that that cell 79 that's the mean. I could even compute the variance or standard deviation if I wanted to. Does anybody have a question right now? The other thing I want to do, because I don't like it being over there, so I'm just going to come over here and I'm going to delete these columns. I'm going to shift left, give myself more working space. Okay, so I look at my data. Now when I generated this in my head, I was thinking of this as like test scores. All right. So let's pretend, for the sake of argument, these are test scores on an exam. And so suppose I want to figure out, do I need to make a curve from the traditional, 90 to 100 is an A, 80 to 90 is a B type thing. And so maybe I want to count these guys. I want to sort of make a sort of distribution. Like, how about I go between, 100 and maybe I want to do like 85 to 90, 90 to 95 type thing. Does that make sense? So suppose, let's think of it this way. Maybe I want to go, okay, let's think of all the people who are, say, now we could do, now that it's in order, we could do this by hand, for example, right? Does that make sense? So let's think about it this way. Let's say 95 plus. How many people got 95 or better? Well, if I look at that, if I scroll down to the bottom, I got a 105, so it looks to me like there's 3. So maybe I'll label this. Maybe this will be the grade ranges. Or maybe the score range. And then over here, we will call this the number of students. Or students in that range, or scores in that range. So once again, I can format it. Again, I don't know how good or how well you guys work around. What I'm using is, I want to make it look pretty, so I'm using this center everything, and this means center left and right and up and down. And wrapping text makes it look like that, and merge allows me to take 3 cells into 1. So again, I don't know how fluid you guys are with this, but I can't emphasize it enough. If you ain't good at it, learn. Just my advice. Take it or leave it. Okay, so then maybe the next sort of thing that we'll want to study is maybe we want to do 90, say we'll do 90 to 94. I don't know. And then we'll do maybe 85 to 89. So how many students are in 90 to 94? Well, 90 to 94 looks like I have 1, 2, 3. And how many are in 85 to 89? Oh, just 2, right? And then what about like 80 to 84? Looks like I have 1. And then 75 to 79. How many do I have from 75 to 79? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And then 70 to 74. Now, there is a way you can have the computer do this for you, but I am doing it manually right now because I think this is a better way for us to learn. Do you understand that? And you might even say, well, what's specific about 95 or 90 to 94? I'm just thinking simple. So I'm doing every 5 numbers. I could have done 90 to 100, 80 to 90. I could have done it that way. On the homework, I think I told you use 5 classes or use 7 classes. So then you get to decide, how do you want to choose your classes? Does that make sense? Okay, so 70 to 74, I got a bunch. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So let's make sure I didn't make any mistakes. And then 65 to 69, I have 1, 2, 3. and then of course 64 and below. And so how many were there? Just 2. Now the first thing I have to do is I have to double check. Do these numbers add up? Right here, do they add up to, let's kind of give this a color. Do these guys add up to 25? They better. So let's check. So let's just sort of check down here. We'll hit the function button, and I'm just going to hit sum. I just want to make sure that these guys add up to 25. And they do. Does that make sense? Because if I had 25 scores, and this is how they're distributed. Does anybody have a question about this? Comments? Anybody at home in the peanut galleries? Everybody seeing Excel? So really, this is a frequency distribution here. Someone have something to say? You guys are quiet today. You could call this a frequency distribution. Now let's just see, this is what I mean when I say learn by experience. Let's see what happens when I just use built-in stuff from Excel. So, so suppose we say, okay, how am I going to analyze this? So Grady keeps using this word analyze. Well, let's go up to data. And do we see anything that says analyze? Can we do an analysis somewhere? What if we go to formulas, layout? So it might seem very, very overwhelming, correct? And say you're like, okay, I don't see that. You know that when you highlight something and you right click, there's this quick analysis. So let's just say we click on that. What tools do we have? Well, we have data bars, we have charts, tables, go to table. Oh, okay. All this, it seems very overwhelming. So we say, maybe we'll ignore that for a second. Maybe you get stuck and you say, okay, let's go, isn't there a help button? Let me say histogram. And then it yells at me because it's like, well, you didn't select anything, right? So the reason I'm doing this and what I want to encourage you to do is don't think of this as it's a rush to get the answer. Think of it as like a playground where you're going to learn things and you're going to learn by trial and error. And the first few things that you try might not work. They might not get you what you want. So you might almost seem like, you might feel like you're kind of sort of, I don't want to say lost, but you're like, what am I going to do? All right, so anyhow, I go back to this data button and I say, I know there's got to be an analysis button somewhere. So what is what if? What does that mean? And then that seems kind of, oh, what if we look at a data table? Well, there's got to be somehow, some way, a histogram, right? So we say, okay, well, maybe, what if we hit this button again and maybe we type in histogram and see if it gives us a built-in thing, if it helps us. Well, I guess I got to spell it right. But seeing it's not auto doing it, clearly this is not the place we need to be. So again, I'm emphasizing a point that don't think of, I mean, you know, this is, I don't want to say it's getting off topic because it's not. Think of this learning as sort of a process. That's what we're doing here. We have a process. Just like lots of things you learn. It doesn't happen overnight. And usually the best way we learn is through experience. not from just someone giving us the answer, but us trying things that don't necessarily work. Okay, so if we go back here, whoa, that's not what I wanted to hit. If we go back here, and let's say we want to make a histogram. So let's take this data, hit this button right here. And let's just hit more charts. And what is a cluster column? Well, let's see if this helps us. There you go. Looks like it made a histogram for me. Is that not a histogram? I mean, if I don't know, maybe you're gonna look, I don't even know what a histogram is already. What is that? It had our data, our score ranges, what if we click on one of these buttons? What do these things do? Could we change the title if we wanted to? Could we label it? Absolutely. These are the things you learn by playing around. Is this a histogram? I mean, by the way we defined it to begin, yes, it's a histogram. It's a bar graph. Huh? Does anybody have any questions about this? So again, let me delete this for a second. Or let's, oh, here, I right-clicked on it, by the way. It says change chart type. I click on it. Ooh, maybe we change colors. I don't know. Ooh, that's pretty. Now it gave them all different colors. But I lost what was happening down here. By the way, I'm gonna can click these. I'm just playing around. I'm you right now. I'm just clicking buttons at the top. I'm changing colors. Oh, this one's nice because it tells me how many are in each group. Does anybody have a question about this? What's this button do? Oh, I can hide certain things. I can analyze each one. And this is pretty cool. Look in the right-hand side. As I move my cursor up and down, it's also moving it in the chart, and it's also moving it in my frequency distribution table. It's highlighting it. It's very adaptive. What a time to be alive. So now I can delete this if I wanted. I'm going to delete. Get out of here.
Can you hit the right click on it if they bring up the histogram?
On this one?
I think it was when you like organizing the charts.
Here?
Maybe that's it. Yeah.
This?
Yeah.
I mean, this is technically a histogram. I don't remember what you were talking about. This thing?
I think you said you double clicked on it, and then drop down menu.
Yeah, where did I? Yeah, that was a. Oh, where did I do with that? Well, here, what I want to show you anyhow is I want to delete it. Oh, if I click this, change chart type. So if you come over here, you call it a histogram, and okay. Yeah, but what's the issue now though? Now it interpreted our data all wrong, right? This is not what we were interested in doing. So by the way, if you're looking for the button up here, change chart type, that tells you all these different sort of types of plots you can have. Column. So here's a good thing too you might want to do. You might say, what's the difference between a histogram and what they're calling a column chart, right? When I hit that, it goes back. I mean, look, we're going to get back to what you said in a second, but first off, this chart is a visualization of our data. Now, you might say it's good or bad, but it's a visualization. It's showing us what this table has. How many scores? Well, I guess we should. I I want the one that had this. I'd like to delete it, and I don't know why it's not letting me delete. It's really making me annoyed. Delete. Why won't it? Well, when in doubt, cut it out there. All right, so look, let me go over this again. Imagine you're trying to learn this. You don't know how to get it to do a histogram. So you're playing around. You're playing around, so you highlight this data. Then there's this button down here. You click it, this quick analysis button. And then there's all kinds of things you could do. There's charts and tables that you can make. And so what I'm saying is if you hit chart, you have this clustered column. You can have it horizontal. You can have it vertical. Maybe we hit more charts and see what we have. And then we go to all charts. And then if I come down here, there's a histogram. Now, what's happening here, why the histogram, when I click on it, is not displaying my data the way I would expect it, it's because I did something incorrect, at least in Excel's eyes. So if you notice, this left-hand column where I have the 95, that stuff, 95, 90, 94, right? If I want Excel to make a histogram, I have to put these values in a proper way. I have to, I'm not putting them in the human way. My human mind says I'm going to separate them like this. I'm going to separate them by 95 to 100. But for the built-in histogram function, now when I use the words built-in, Excel has, someone has already done this, made this function that when you highlight and say histogram, it takes your data and it makes this histogram. Does that make sense? Now, the thing is, it only works if your data is put in correctly. Does that make sense? It has to be input correctly. Now, when I made a chart, it was okay. It just took my left-hand column and it understood that those were going to be my horizontal sort of, and then it knew that the right-hand column was going to be the heights of each one of my quote-unquote charts or my bars. But if I want to do a histogram, I have to do it slightly differently. So how do I do that? How do I get it to make a histogram? Clearly, it's not, it is being confused right now by what I put in. There is something it doesn't like. Now, maybe it's something simple. Maybe I should have put, maybe these numbers have to be in some sort of order. Like, or maybe I should have, instead of having that 90 to 94 or that 85 to 89, maybe there's a better, or maybe there's a correct way to input these things. By the way, that column on the left, these are typically called your bins. You could, and the way to think about it is imagine you're sorting data. You know, you have one bin for this collection, the next bin, like a physical thing, like a box maybe. So the sort of the technical term for these things are called bins.
About sorting them.
Well, right, it doesn't know how to sort them correctly. Well, it does, but it's misinterpreting what I want. So the way I am communicating right now with Excel, there is a lack of communication. Does that make sense? So, okay, so let's try it differently. So, okay, so I say, okay, so this is good. Something's not right here. I'm getting something that I don't expect. Now, maybe at this point, you say, okay, maybe at this point you go on the internet and you say, okay, I got an idea. I am going to maybe ask the internet or go look at a video on how to do this. And when you do this, you realize that if you want to use the built-in histogram, you have to enter your bin in a specific way. And the way we do that is we take our maximum of each bin. So for example, how many bins do I have? I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 bins, correct? How many I have? All right, now let's ignore this. So I did, let's say, okay, let's delete this. Maybe we can try something else. I love learning. Learn by doing is the best. So now, instead of me putting it down like this, let me delete this. Get this back to white. I don't like it when I have to have everything look the same. I don't like when it looks bad. So put my borders back. I like borders. All right, so look, let me try something different. So maybe I will go in the following way. Maybe I'll say, okay, maybe I'll do my bins this way. So let's say, instead of me actually writing a numerical range in the column, let me just say each bin's max score. So let's say, what did we say? We had 65 and below. So let's say 69 is the lowest max score. And then what was the next one? 74, right? Then what would the next one be? 79. Then the next one would be 84. Then the next one would be 89. And then 94. And then the next one, well, let's say 106, because that's bigger than my highest number. So now I entered these values differently. So my first bin will be everybody up to 69. My next bin would be everybody between 70 and 74. Does that make sense? So on. Okay, now what I want to do is, let's say, what happens if, now I'm not going to count manually this time. What if I just highlight this now? And then I go to my data analysis, and then I go to charts, more charts, and suppose I go to all charts, and then I come down here and hit histogram. So once again, I get this, which doesn't look very illustrative. It doesn't look like it's matching my data whatsoever. And what's even more strange is you're looking downstairs, you see these like 6992 business. You're like, what does all this mean? Anybody have something they want to say? What are we doing, or does anybody have a question actually? What are we doing that's confusing the computer? How do we go about this? So once again, I'm going to delete this. Now we could go and manually count, just like we did before. It wouldn't be hard. And then we could make a chart. And it would spit out something similar to what we had before. But if we want to use this built-in thing, the histogram function, we know it's there. Why isn't it working for us? Do you understand the point I'm trying to make? There is a tool here that we can use that will make our life easy, and we have to figure out how to use it. And right now, we can't do it. So let's go back up to this data thing. Maybe okay, where's our data analysis tool? Maybe we'll type that in. I want what if, and then I say data table. That doesn't look obvious. Again, we're looking for something that's obvious. We would imagine that there should be a box that pops up, and we just highlight our numbers, and then it creates it for us. I mean, that's the goal. I mean, if not, why are we wasting our time? We'll just do it by hand. There has to be a simple way to do it. Because, of course, with this particular instance, I have 25 data points. But imagine I have 100 or 1,000. You don't want to do this by hand. I hope you understand the sort of the point I'm trying to make. So there's got to be a better sort of way of doing this. All right, so let's try once again. Let's do this weird thing where we go and we do totals and we do it. No, I don't want that. Undo that. Undo. Hit the wrong button. Undo. I go back and I want my chart. And then I go to more charts. And I go art and all. I want a histogram. So let's just say we go here and we get this weird picture, which we know it can't be real. Okay, so what we want to do is there options here? Are we doing something? Well, let's go to the select data. And we ask ourselves, okay, what should we be putting here so that we got the proper, like, what is our input? What is our, let's see if we can, for instance, our data range. So if we wanted to do the organizing on its own, wouldn't our input, instead of being our bins, wouldn't our input be our data? So I don't know if you could see this, but what you have up here highlighted, it has this stuff. G, we don't want to be there. Don't we want this to be our data? Okay, that's good. Now this looks a little more sort of realistic. So all I did is I put my data in. Now, what it's doing, it's organizing my data. Now, it has a default setting. If you look down here at these numbers, now it's not exactly ridiculous what these things are representing. This is representing ranges. The lowest one up to 75.3. So what it's doing by default, and this is important, what it's doing by default is it's putting it in 4 bins. That's what it's doing, bin 1, 2, 3, and 4. But I don't want 4 bins. I want to use these 7 that I already wrote down. So maybe we're doing something wrong then. So let's come here to the edit button. What is our axis label range? Well, what if we highlight this now? Well, that didn't help. Change nothing. By the way, it's worth pointing out some things about this before we try to fix it. If you look at the first bin, I have 10. The second bin, I have 9. That's 19. The next bin, there is 5. That's 24. And then there's 1 in the last bin. So that's 25. This is accounting for my 25. It's just not doing it the way I want to do it. So how do I get it to put the appropriate bins down here? No, I come up here, maybe add something. Well, that's not helping me. Axes, no. Titles, no. I don't want that yet. I can't even get it to look the way I want it to look. Data labels, no. Select data. What am I doing wrong? Maybe I hit the help button. It's going to try to help me. What am I doing wrong? So by default, we see that it's telling us, or it's giving us 4 bins, but we don't want 4, we want 7, or maybe we want 15, depending on what, maybe we want 20. So how do we get it to do more? So let's go back to, clearly there's got to be a setting here that we can sort of work on. We have this edit button. What does this do? Series Y, series name. Maybe we'll play around here. What happens if we put these creatures in here? We're just trying things. Nothing. So maybe we come here and we come to format chart. Is this going to help us? And it doesn't look like it. That's more of an aesthetic thing. So we have to figure out what it is we're doing wrong. What if we went back and how do we change? Or so maybe a good thing to do is, and this could be ending up, well, sometimes what happens, and maybe some of you ran into this if you did this over the weekend, is sometimes you go to the internet to find an answer to one question. Like maybe right now you're saying, why don't you just Google how to increase the number of bins? The problem is, not that that's a problem, but you end up introducing more issues. Because then you go looking and then you start realizing you're trying to answer one question and while you're doing that, you end up getting 10 new ones. Okay, so I think we should pause here for a second. And what time is it? 1:20. Okay, good. And again, let's now sort of, they call this like a reset. We have to recall now what is in fact our issue. Our issue is we figured out a way that we can just highlight data and put it in a histogram without much work. We didn't even have to reorder it. We didn't have to count anything by hand. We could have, we didn't have to. So now our problem has come down to the fact that we want, instead of four bins, we want, say, 7 or 10. So really that is our problem now. How many bins? How do we change the number of bins? Now, everybody, I shouldn't say everybody, that doesn't make any sense. Every piece of software has sort of its own default settings. For example, that software that I used to generate those numbers, its default when I make a histogram uses 10 bins, I think. Now, right now, what it seems like we're getting is we're getting too many, or excuse me, we're not getting as many bins as we want. But when we go and look at the settings on this thing, if I right click again and I go to my select data, this seems to be the tool we want to use. But we can't figure out how to do it properly. So if I take my data source again, and now here it looks to me like this says edit. What do we want for our range? Well, again, if we try this, we thought this was going to get the job done, but it didn't. Now, if we go back here and right click, by the way, if I go back to my select data, what if I tried to, what is it about the way it's putting this data in that might be useful? Why isn't, it seems to us that it's actually doing, we think it's doing what we want it to do. I mean, look at these numbers. It seems to us like it's saying, okay, then you should break it between these two, but it's not doing that. So how can we go about it? What do you think we can do? Does anybody have any ideas? Well, okay, so what do you mean by labeling? I'm not going to say, I don't mean to say you're wrong. What I'm curious is, Okay, but see, if you look at it, it seems to be exactly what we want. I mean, look at it. I mean, look at the bottom. It definitely seems like it's taking our data points and separating them into 4 groups. We're calling bins, right? But if you look at the horizontal, and then in the vertical, the height of each one of these bars is doing what we want it to do, telling us how many are in there. So it seems to us, and this is what I was kind of blabbering about, 3 minutes ago, is how do we get it to do, instead of 4 blue bars, how do we get 7 blue bars? Right, but that's what we're trying to do, right? How do we do that? I mean, that's the question we're asking, right?
What if we did like 61 to 65?
Well, right, we tried that before, though, did we not? Why is it yelling at us? All right, stop it. Here, I'm going to delete this again. I'm just cutting. So what if we tried something else? What if we went to like insert and say, okay, let's insert something. What do we have here? Up here in the middle, you'll see you have all these charts. Maybe here, a statistic chart, histogram. So I'm just going to hit the histogram, and now it's blank, right? Okay, so let's just cut this for a second. What if instead now I highlight this data now, and I go to insert and I hit histogram again? You see right away it defaults to that. Why isn't it giving us an option? So you're on to something about labeling. So what if we come here and let's go back and let's say select data, okay, format chat. What if we go to properties? Or what if we go to size? Is there anything here? Well, no, this just looks like the physical size of the chart. Remember, our goal is to try to figure out how to make this be more representative of what we have. So maybe we'll come back here and we'll go to select data again. Or why isn't it giving us anything about our axes? Why is it that I can't say I want it more? So if I go to change chart type, that doesn't help me. So another way to phrase our question right here is, what do we, so another way to phrase it is, how do we sort of, if we just look at it as a bigger problem, not just what we're trying to do right now, the question is, how do we edit these things, right? Because even if we got it to work the first time, one skill you're still going to want to have is to adjust it. Maybe if you make a histogram with 5 bins, it doesn't really give you the complete picture, or vice versa. Maybe you want less bins. Maybe you want more. And so the question is, how do you do that? Okay, so let's cancel that again. Let's go back to this format business. And what if we go to horizontal category axis? What does this tell us? And so, voila, 4 score and 7 years after I clicked enough things and trial and error for 25, 30 minutes, I found something that might be helpful. What I found is the key that I've been looking for. Okay, bins by category. Well, that doesn't really help me. Automatic. Well, automatic, it gave me 4, but now I can set my width. What if I don't want it to be 14? What if I want it to be 5? Oh, that's no fun. What instead of that, what if I did number of bins? Let's do, instead of 5, let's do 7. So now, if I do 7 bins, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, I now have my histogram. Yeah.
For those 7 bins, like the hat arrange the bins, it's taken from your.
No, right. That's a great point. It's not. So we still haven't got what we really wanted yet, right? All this is doing is taking the range of all my numbers and dividing it into 7 pieces as equally as it can. We're not doing that. What we were doing is we wanted to do 69 to 74 as one bin, less than 69 as another. So in many ways, the next question we have to ask, can we manually set each bin width? Do you understand this? I mean, I think your question hits the point, right? So let me just sort of illustrate this one more time. This bin right here, what we're doing is we're taking the smallest number, 61.3, and then the largest, 105.6. You're taking how far apart they are and dividing that distance into 7 equal spaced things, which is not bad, but what's happening is it's not giving us this. Okay, but now that we told it we want 7 bins, maybe now if we go back here and we go to edit or select our data and we put our horizontal guys in, did that give us what we wanted? Well, it doesn't look like it. It looks like it gave us the same exact thing that they gave us. So now the next question becomes, how do I manually do this? So now, see, that's why I love doing this thing. People would get mad at me and say, why do you waste so much time on this? Because this is what I like. This is learning. So every time we think we solved a problem, we get a new problem. I mean, I don't mean problem in the worst sense. But now we're in an issue where, okay, we can figure out we can use these bins this way, but how do I get the bins to be exactly what I want? And the answer is you can't. Well, I shouldn't say you can't. Not doing this way. By default, the histogram is going to break it up in evenly. If you want to break it up in your specific way, you have to use something different. You have to take your frequency table and convert it to a frequency chart, which is what we did originally. So let me reiterate that. If we want it to match our, and by the way, we could do, well, I'm not going to do that right now. If we want it to match if we wanted to specifically take that data and say, I want to make each bin this size, I have to do it differently than just using this built-in function. This built-in function is just going to do this. That's what it's going to do. Now, chances are that might not be an issue. But you could double check. Is this what we found before? Did we have, so if you come over here and let's just count for the sake of argument, how many do we have below 69? Below 69, we have 4. Right? So it's not, do you understand that? It's saying, if we look here, up to 3. But if we look at our chart, that means it's not using up to 69. It's using a different threshold. And then if we count between, if we wanted to know 69 to 74, we'd have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Well, that one, yeah, right. So it's separating it slightly different. Now, is one wrong and one right? No. There's really, again, don't ever forget the biggest picture in all this. We're trying to visualize data. That's it. Sometimes a histogram is good at that. Sometimes it's not. Sometimes it depends on how many bins you choose before something turns or might be useful. And so, okay, so part of the sort of the message I'm trying to give you even today is, okay, here you go. Then now, one of the things that you might want to realize is I got a lot of stuff that I could play around with. Lots and lots of options, but are they giving me what I want? So look, the only way that you get anything out of this, and I mean this, is if you do this. I mean, I am trying to illustrate the process of this coming from your vantage point. What is it like for someone who's not used to doing this? Not someone like myself who's done this many, many, many times before, but from your perspective, your vantage point. When you get on here and it looks very overwhelming because you have very limited experience. But I got to be honest, it's more about moving that mouse around in trial and error than it is anything else. Now, of course, you could say, okay, I'm going to go to the internet. Let's say, let me share this with you. I'll go to what if I went to the internet and said, how do I make my own bin sizes? Excel histogram. So we click on the first thing. Who knows if this will be any good or not? Maybe we'll learn something new. So this is your problem right here. I'm trying to create a histogram. The bin sizes are automatically chosen, don't suit me. I'm trying to determine how to manually do it. How can I do it? And look what it tells you, what I said. You can't. You got to use more sophisticated things. You got to make a frequency table. We getting that? So here's what we learned so far after almost, what, an hour. This is okay. I'm telling you, this is learning. You might just say we're just babbling. It's not. It's learning. And hopefully you do this. You recognize, you go and do this. But what we learned is there's a built-in histogram function. The downside to it is you can't choose your bin size. Is that understandable? Now, you could probably go in there and if you learn some tricks, you can maybe make it more useful. But instead, what you have to do is you have to use what's called this built-in frequency function. So what the frequency function does is it actually takes all your data and it counts and puts them in bins for you. It makes a frequency table for you. We did it manually. That's what we did. We counted with our fingers. But what the frequency function does is you scroll down the list, it puts them into bins, whatever size you want them in. Does that make sense? It's a more sophisticated tool, though. All right, so listen, here's what we're going to do. I hope, and I shouldn't say that, but I hope and I pray that you guys will actually play around with this stuff. And what we'll do on Wednesday is we will do an example in detail. We won't, but the only way you're going to get anything out of it is if you actually suffer through this. Maybe you've already done it over the weekend, so that's good. But what you're going to get out of it, if we actually do this, we'll do a problem in detail on Wednesday. I'll do the table. I'll show you how to use the frequency thing. We'll show you how to do it all. And then that way, and you can turn the homework in next week. I'd rather you try to do it real nice and pretty if you want. You don't have to turn the homework in Wednesday. Is that cool with everybody? So again, I hope you appreciate what we're trying to do today, and I hope you'll try this. Otherwise, I don't know if you will. So anyhow, you guys have yourselves a good day, and I will see you guys Wednesday. Thank you very much. Even though we didn't really, we didn't write anything today. It's one of those days. All right, guys, thank you. Take care.